Hi everyone! Today I'll be going over some tips and tricks for using RStudio. RStudio is just one of the many IDE options available to run R, but it's personally my favorite. It can be downloaded easily from the RStudio website for free. Just click on the download, select which version you want, and install it onto your computer. I'm going to assume that you already have downloaded it and opened it, so you should see something similar to this. Your background color probably looks different than mine, but I'll show you how to customize that later on. First, let's get oriented with the layout. In the top left, we have the script. This is where you can write scripts and save them. Underneath that, you have the console, which is where the code that was run and the output shows up. You can also run lines of code in the console, but I recommend, unless it's just something you want to do a quick check on, write all of your code in the script. That will allow you to go back to it several times and save it. Over on the other side, in the top right, we have the Environment, History, and Connections pane. The main tab that you will use from those three is the Environment. This shows you all of the variables, data frames, functions, etc. that you have in your global environment to work with. Underneath that, we have the Plots, Files, Packages, Help, and Viewer pane. This pane is where you can see all of the files in your working directory, which is the main folder you're working from. Also, any plots you create will be displayed in this pane, and you can see which packages you have installed and libraried. The Help window is where you can search for any function in a package, and it shows the vignette for that function. It explains what the function does, the arguments it takes, what it outputs, and usually gives an example of how to use it. Keep in mind that the quality of documentation varies, so some packages that are widely used have really thorough documentation, but other packages that are more niche probably don't have as good documentation. To open a new script or R Markdown or any other file, click the icon that looks like a new page with a plus sign. You'll see a drop-down list of all possible files you can create. Next to that is the New Project button. I'll be going over projects, what they are, and how to use them in another video, but just know that's where you would open one. Next to that is the Open File button, which allows you to open a file such as a script or an R Markdown that you've saved and were working on before. Next, let's customize our RStudio a bit. Go to Tools and click on Global Options. To set your default working directory, click this button. What this does is, if you open RStudio outside of a project, then it will default to that folder as your directory. A directory is the folder where you are primarily working out of. So if I save a figure, unless I specify another folder to save it to, that figure will be saved in my working directory. The code section is where you can change the formatting of your code in your scripts. Most of the automatic settings are fine, but one I would recommend is turning on the soft wrap. This makes it so that long lines of code are wrapped onto the next line instead of having to use the horizontal scroll bar to see the end of your line of code. Another handy feature of RStudio is the snippets feature. There are already some built in, and you can create your own as well. Basically, what it does is when you start typing a pattern of words, it will recognize that you're trying to write something and create a template for you to easily fill in. For example, writing a for loop or a function. Now let's move on to customizing the appearance of our session. As I mentioned earlier in the video, your screen is probably a different color than mine, and this is where you change it. The editor theme changes the color scheme. The one I have is a custom theme that I made, which is super easy. I'll be making another video on how you can do that. And if you've already done that, you can click Add and find the CSS file that is for your theme. Otherwise, you can pick another color scheme you like. You can also change the layout of the panes. For example, I prefer to have my pane set up so that the script and console are beside each other, and the environment and file panes are below them on the bottom. Once we've made changes that we want, we hit Apply and OK. So you can see that changed the layout of our RStudio session. And it will save these changes, so every time you open up a new RStudio session, it will come up like this. You can adjust the size of each pane by clicking on the buttons in the top right of each pane. This is useful for hiding ones that you aren't using and giving yourself more space. I like to have my top two panes as long as possible while I'm coding, but if you want to know what's in your environment, you can keep that showing as well. It's all up to your preference. When you're writing your script, there are some tricks that can make your life easier. Say you have a variable throughout your script that you want to change the name of. In this example, I want to change the name of X. It might not seem like that big of a deal in what I have right now because it's only 2 instances. But if you have a script that is hundreds of lines long, then this can be a lifesaver. All you have to do is highlight one instance of the variable name, then go to Code and Rename in Scope, and you'll see every X is highlighted. I can now type a new letter and they will both be replaced. Another functionality that helps keep your script organized is creating sections. You can do this a few ways. The first is using at least 4 pound signs or hashtags. You know a new section was created when you see a small down arrow pop up beside that line number. You can also use minus signs or equal signs. And sections are useful because they can be folded or hidden when you're not running them, and you can click on this button at the bottom of the pane to quickly jump from section to section. Again, this may not seem that useful in my example, but if you have a script that's hundreds of lines of code, it can be extremely helpful in finding where you need to be. To save your script, click on the floppy disk icon and give it a name with the ending .r. I highly recommend giving it a scriptive name. Otherwise, when you go back to it in the future, you won't know what that script was used for. Trust me, I'm speaking from experience. A new feature of the latest RStudio versions is this Run as Local Job feature. This allows you to run a script in the background and you can still run other code at the same time. So I'll run this as a local job, and when we click on the Jobs tab, we see it was successfully completed. If the script had been longer, it would take longer to run the local job, but in the meantime, I could still run other code in the console. Let's take a look at the bottom pane now. As I mentioned earlier, the Files tab shows all of the files in your working directory, but please don't use that to do anything. You can easily permanently delete files without meaning to, and is bad coding practice, because if you bring data into your R session that way, it is not recorded and someone else would not know what you did. Another bad practice is to use the Packages tab to library in your packages. I only use this to check which ones I have already libraried into the session by looking for the ones with little check marks beside it. And if I'm having an issue installing a package, I'll try to use the install button sometimes. One tab that I do use a lot is the Help tab. This is where you can search for any function that is in a package that you have installed on your computer, and it will give you the help page for that function. For example, if I want to know how to use the filter function for the dplyr package, I search for filter. You can see there are many filter or filter-related functions, so make sure you find the one from the package you want to use. You see this is a well-documented one, and it gives plenty of examples on how to use it. It also has linked related functions, so if I need to use another function, I can click on that link and it takes me to the help vignette for that function directly. Last, I'm going to talk about the Plots tab. I'm just going to make a quick plot using ggplot in the iris dataset. So you can see the plots pane opens automatically, and it shows us the plot I created. Now this doesn't look quite right, so I'm going to get rid of that by clicking the broom icon. This deletes all of the plots you've created thus far in the session. Now I'm going to remake the plot using dots instead of lines. That looks better. Say I want to change the dots so they're colored by a certain grouping. I use the keyboard shortcut Command, or on a PC Control, Alt down arrow to copy the line of code below quickly, and then I'm going to add in the color argument. Now that looks even better. If I want to see it bigger, I can click on the magnifying glass icon and it'll expand to a bigger plot window. Since I have more than one plot, I can click on the back arrow and scroll through the other ones that I made. Say I want to get rid of just one plot. I go to the plot I want to get rid of, click the icon that looks like a piece of paper with a minus sign. That only gets rid of the figure you're currently on, so you can still go back to one that you made previously. So those are just a few tips to make your RStudio user experience better. Let me know below if you have any other cool tricks that I missed. Thanks for watching, and don't forget to subscribe to my channel for more R coding tutorials.